Hello everybody, my name is GM Jesse Kraai and I'd like to welcome you to a new series I'm doing called What is the Story of This Position? It's a little bit like Guess the Move, but the ambition is to say not only maybe what the right move is, but to be able to ground ourselves in the position in terms of what the ideas are going forward. Who do we think is better and why is a big part of it? And having the vocabulary to address whatever imbalances there are in the position. So let's get started, and the way it will work is I will introduce a position, and then you should pause the video for as long as you want while you consider it, and then I'll tell you my own thoughts, which could be right or wrong, about what I see happening in the position. I strongly recommend setting it up on a real board. It's just nicer that way. All right, let's get started. So, all of these positions are from a game I played recently. The PGN is in the video description, and I actually covered it on two shows, on season or episode 7 and 10 of my series on the road back to 2500. And this is just important moments where I made mistakes in the game. So first thing we should say is that white has played a3 and rook c1 in the last couple moves. That just gives you a sense of what happened. Actually, I'll backstep. It went like this. All right, and a3 was before. All right, so what should black play? All right, now it's an interesting question what's going on in the position. First of all, let me talk briefly about the structure. This particular structure, I don't know if it has a name, but I'm calling it the pre-hedgehog. And the point is to say that if white could ever play d4, we would get a hedgehog. For example, a6, d4, and in this position, which is kind of like a Maroczy bind position with this hedgehog set up with the pawns. All right, so it doesn't have a name, but we still have to think about the imbalances, obviously. Both sides have awkward pieces. My bishop is hitting a rock, as is this knight. These knights are, let's call them, reduplicating. And there's no clear sense of what black might do, except someday maybe playing d5. And part of the question that black is struggling with is, does he feel like he's better? Because right away, black could consider d5, after which, let's say ed, ed, I think white needs to play d4. And this position, I thought, was simply equal. Okay. So I felt that black was better. And that's mostly because the white piece is being a little awkward. Now, what I'm going to say about this move has a lot to do, too, with practical play. With a3 and rook c1, white is dreaming about playing b4. But, what do I do to stop this move b4? And I should say, when I said but, that if I do really anything, this b4 move is not so hot because both d5 and cb first make d5 a much stronger option because we're tagging that pawn on b4. So this is why the move itself is less important than being grounded in the position, because what I did was queen c7, and that has a lot to do with the fact that I'm a tempo fiend and I really want to be ahead in development. But with queen c7, I am enabling b4, because if everything opens up, I'm going to get smacked with the rook. So it would have been much better for me to sit on the position with either a move like a6 or the very simple rook e8. And so I'm going to hang the d5 break over his head, and it's very difficult to see actually what white's supposed to do in this position. Okay, let's move on to position number 2. Okay, so this is from the same game, and black has made some progress just moving his knights around in circles. And white, I think, played a mistake here and played takes. And, well, now we have 3 logical moves. We could recapture immediately with this pawn. We can't, of course, capture this way because our knight's hanging. Or we could first capture on f3. Let's assume he's going to recapture with the bishop, and then recapture c5 with either pawn. It's a big decision, and yeah, I'll leave it to you, and then we'll come back. Okay, as in all positions, one of the challenges is going to be to ask, do you feel like you deserve to be better? And I did feel like I deserve to be better, and that's probably true. When I analyzed this game, without the computer, just with myself and a little bit with my friend GM Josh Friedel, we both felt that black should take on f3 first, and he wanted to do this move, which is a nice position where you have maybe thoughts of bishop f6 and play on either e5 or d4. And I wanted to be active and play against this pawn. This is a far more imbalanced position because my pawn on b6 is weak, and I have freed the bishop on g3. Now, one of the interesting things about the decision is both of us felt that in this position that white has attained kind of a shell that's going to be very hard to crack, despite the fact that black's pieces are better. We got a knight coming to f4, and this bishop isn't so hot, for example. So we felt in our hearts that that was a sad thing. In fact, this is what the computer wanted when I checked with the computer, and I actually agree that this was indeed my best move, even though I did it and had regrets about this move. And what the computer sees is that black just has better pieces, even if white has a shell. And that the other options aren't that incredibly promising. So that was an interesting moment for me. And, you know, from here, the game is going to go on. Interesting because I shouldn't be, neither Josh or I should be too brokenhearted over the fact that white gets himself a stable but passive position. All right, here we come to our next position, and it's white's move this time. And as you can see, we have progressed fairly logically from our last position. And the question is, what should white do? Okay, I feel like the story of this position has everything to do with psychology. White has clearly set himself up to play solidly and to not have any weaknesses. And it's not just the hope of getting a draw, by the way. Many strong players overpress in a position like this and get themselves into trouble. Okay, so the trick is, though, is that white has really already made all of his building moves. And what he needs to actually do is to play just some sitting move like bishop e3. But that's very hard to do when black feels like he's a little bit active, like maybe he's going to do something to you. Very difficult to do. And so you should always remember that from either if you're pressing on a like fortress-like position, or if you're sitting in one, the psychological difficulty in just sitting. And so my opponent jerked here. That's the word that sometimes the Russians use to describe positions like this. And he became frisky all of a sudden. And the great thing that I learned from watching a Magnus Carlsen interview, a lot of the things the guy says just totally go by my head, but this one really made sense, is that the reason he was better than other players is he knew when to move everything all in on the attack, and he knew when to keep things back in reserve. And here white gets frisky, and it's actually an incredibly poor move, a4, but we get it psychologically. He wants to do something like a5 and, you know, try to do something himself. But this will prove to be an incredible weakness, and that's really all what black's active pieces need. All right, let's move on to the next position. Okay, as you can see, black's made some reasonable progress by controlling the B file. And the question is again, what should white do and what's going on in the position? Okay, when I saw this position, I was pretty certain that white was holding with rook b1. And it's actually surprisingly wrong. Because when everything trades, all black has to realize is that this knight needs to come back. And once it comes back, the a5 pawn will be basically a goner. And not only that, but the knight on c6 will have its own interesting play too. And there's a kind of interesting psychological problem with this maneuver as well, because it's blocked by my pieces and therefore feels like it's going to take forever. But of course, white is passive. And so the question is, what should he do? And he ended up playing a more tenacious move, rook a2. But because of the same plan, with moving the knight over, it's still a very difficult situation for black. Do I look like that guy? With me are IM's David Prus and Kostya Kavutsky, and this is Chess Dojo. On Discord, we have a whole community of people trying to improve their chess. On Twitch, we're doing regular events, and what I'm asking you to do right now is to subscribe to our channel here on YouTube.